Welcome to Authentic Energy, a podcast dedicated to getting to the bottom of what it means to be your true, authentic self at work. I am your host, Wendy Brand. Let's take this learning journey together as I meet with guests weekly. Whether you are a leader or individual contributor, a teacher or a nurse, we'll share conversations and stories that highlight meaningful connections, self-awareness, a sense of belonging, and all the components necessary to create a workplace where you can show up in your authentic energy. Welcome back to Authentic Energy. I'm Wendy Brand, your host, and today is a solo episode. I'm excited to share a very important framework with you in this episode. It's the foundation for the consulting work that I'm doing on culture and organizational health. But first, I want to share some behind the scenes things happening with my personal and professional mission and some changes to the podcast format. As I am becoming more and more clear on my mission and purpose for my life and my business, things like my podcast will shift as well to align with that. So when I first left my corporate career and began interviewing leaders for this podcast, I was searching for the key that would unlock the secrets to preventing burnout. I personally wanted to know, and I thought that sharing it through a podcast was a great way to allow others to benefit from the conversations I was going to have. And in that process and through those conversations that I've shared with you over the last year, there became two distinct opportunities that I saw for how I could serve others and help them prevent experiencing the burnout that I had at least twice experienced in my 25 plus year career. At first, those two pathways seemed very separate, and it felt like I was building two different businesses. So I've mentioned this in several episodes, just in a different context, and that is that if burnout is going to be prevented, there is the responsibility of the individual. Like there's things I can do as an individual to help prevent burnout, and there's the responsibility of the organization. They both play a role in preventing and recovering from burnout. So as I was going through this process of uncovering and looking for that secret to the key to unlock the secret to preventing burnout, through this process, it was obvious to me the role of the individual. In fact, I was actually embarrassed that I had allowed myself to burn out, and I saw it honestly as a form of weakness at first. Leaving the highest paying role in my career in 2022, the manner in which I left, the teams that I was leading, the way that I felt like I had no other choice. I was disappointed in the way that I left. But at the time, I just saw no other way out. But I quickly understood where I was to blame. But I had been worn too thin and I was hanging on by a thread. I felt like I was just dangling out there by myself. And so the second piece that I learned was that the organization plays a role in preventing burnout too. And part of my research on that topic brought me to a book called The Burnout Challenge by Christina Maslach and Michael Lader. In fact, in episode 12, I provide an overview of the book, which is more heavily focused on the role of the organization. So if you want more detail on this concept, go back and listen to episode 12. By the way, I've gone in and relabeled all of my podcasts starting with a number so that as I begin to go through the framework in more detail, I can reference back to episodes for you to just provide more context if you haven't listened to them, if you're new to the show when you join, or just to go back as a refresher. So go check out episode 12 if you're interested in learning more about the Burnout Challenge. And so these two pathways, the individual and the organization's role in preventing burnout, both felt like they were calling me, but they felt like two different businesses that I would have to choose between. So helping individuals through leadership and development coaching, or helping businesses through culture consulting. But what I learned over the last 6 months is that both are important and can be done together. I've been working with nonprofit and small business CEOs to provide both culture consulting and individual coaching for their organizations. And I'm finding that it's actually very impactful to partner the two together. And so I'm going to continue down this path. And So, to better align the podcast to my business, I've decided to try something different over the next few months and see how it goes. So, each week I'll actually be dropping two new episodes. The first episode on Tuesdays will be more about the individual personal development. These will mostly be solo episodes without guests, where I'll be talking more about the personal side of authentic energy. My goal here is to connect with you as the individual, not necessarily related to work, and help you connect with your authentic energy, which is really about experiencing a sense of ease and flow in your life. And in what you're doing at work or in relationships, and finding fulfillment and satisfaction. And this can lead to greater productivity, creativity, and just overall well being. So, this leans more on my coaching expertise. So, I'll be pulling in some of that in some of these episodes. And cultivating authentic energy requires self awareness, a clear sense of values and purpose, and the ability to align your actions with your values and purpose. And so think of the Seed series that I did with Whitney Conservic. I may even have her back, but that's what Tuesdays are going to look like, more of that personal development and growth, and really more aligned with authentic energy. Then on Fridays, I'll be dropping episodes more focused on how your organization can create that healthy environment to support the individual and the business success. I'll be leaning on the Thrive culture framework that I've created to help organizations with their role in preventing burnout for their employees. And so now that you understand the differences in the direction, I'm going to take you through that Thrive culture framework. But I hope that makes sense, that my 2 episodes a week, similar messaging, and hopefully they both benefit you. So Tuesdays is more about you as an individual. And then Fridays is more about what can you do in your organization to help build that healthy culture of well-being, and creating an environment where people can bring that authentic energy, that personal work that they've done, and show up at work with their authentic energy. And so as a leader, creating that environment for them. So that's the framework. That's the kind of how we'll be structuring the podcast for a couple months. We'll see if it works. Hopefully it does. But so now let's talk a little bit about the Thrive culture framework that I've created. I'm going to touch on this at a high level, share some episodes that I've already had that tie back to this framework. And then as we move forward in the future, in future episodes, I'll be bringing on guests and sharing my own experiences with clients that tie back to this framework. And when I begin working with an organization, usually the CEO or the head of HR, these are the 6 areas that I assess and determine where there may be opportunities for improvement. But you can assess your own organization and reference the episodes to guide you and your teams on the journey to a healthier culture and organization overall. This content is meant to help you on your own. And then obviously, if you want someone to partner with, happy to help. But really, my goal is going to be that I'm creating content that you can apply to your own workplace. Okay, so here we go. So I mentioned the burnout challenge, and that's really where, when I started digging into the organization's role in burnout, the book, The Burnout Challenge, outlined 6 key areas that they found factor in their burnout. And so the 6 key areas are work overload, a lack of control, insufficient rewards, a breakdown of community, absence of fairness, and value conflict. And so I've come up with 6 components that I believe address the 6 aspects of the burnout challenge. And so the research found in the book that one of the reasons that employees leave or burn out is due to a mismatch between the organization's values and the individuals. So when core values are clearly defined and built into the DNA of an organization, employees can make a decision up front on whether their personal values align with that of the organization. So that's one of the things. So that the T in Thrive culture is tribal values. And cultures that thrive don't just have core values clearly defined. They are embedded into that employee life cycle. And so we'll spend an episode or two diving deeper into this in future episodes. But basically, what that looks like is putting yourself in the shoes of a potential employee and how they might view your organization to determine they want to work there, and all of the touch points with culture along their journey from hire to retire. So I even say that that value proposition, employee value proposition that you may have created for your organization, or if you haven't yet, it's a good place to start. And that's something that we can touch on in one of the episodes. But really, from the time they first begin interviewing, hearing about your company and interviewing, those core values should be a part of that messaging, a part of the marketing in recruiting and hiring. It should be part of how they're onboarded. It should be part of how they are how their performance is managed against those core values, how they're rewarded and recognized, how they're promoted, how they are developed. Those core values should be integrated across what we call the employee life cycle. So that is tribal values. So when I say tribal values, that is like, they're not just on a poster on the wall, but the company, the employees live and breathe those values. They know what they are. You see behaviors that align with those core values. It's just evident when you walk the halls of the organization and meet people that they are living those core values. So the T in Thrive culture is tribal values. The H in Thrive culture is helpful tools and processes. Another primary reason that employees leave the organization is they don't feel like they have the tools they need to do their job. And so sometimes that shows up as lack of control, or maybe absence of fairness. So, and maybe even workload. So if processes aren't clearly defined and roles and responsibilities aren't clearly defined, that can impact workload. It can lead to confusion and missed expectations. Another piece that I tie in here is clearly, again, that defining the roles and responsibilities. I can't tell you how many times I've been working with an organization. They're complaining that leadership is complaining that the team isn't doing what is expected of them. And then when I meet with the team members to understand what the gap is, 9 times out of 10, I uncovered that it's a process that's not been clearly defined, or several roles with overlapping responsibility, and there's no clarity on expectations at each role. So the H, again, in Thrive culture is helpful tools and processes. The R in Thrive culture is responsive listening strategies. It's not always easy to know what your employees really think, but one way to gather information is through a culture survey that can provide you with data points and qualitative information that at least get you some high-level understanding. However, where a lot of organizations fail is that they gather the data, but they don't ever do anything about it. And when this happens, employees lose trust and stop responding to future surveys because they feel like it's not going to go anywhere. I've experienced this with a client that had been doing annual culture surveys for years, and leadership was upset that the response rates were really low, and they didn't know why employees weren't participating in their survey. But when we dug in, we realized that employees had stopped responding because they didn't see the point. They had given their feedback years previously, and there were no changes to the organization. Leadership made no changes. They didn't talk about the results of the survey. Everything was nothing was really disclosed or talked about. And so they got to the point where they thought, why bother? So it's really important that that we not only put listening strategies in place, and there's multiple ways to do that, and that'll be another episode, but that R is responsive listening strategies for a reason, because you can't just have a listening strategy if you're not going to respond to it. The I in Thrive culture is inspiring inclusivity and connection. And this really is about, you can call it DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And I think You can call it that, you can call it whatever you want, but really employees want, we all as human beings want that sense of connection, a sense to feel that sense of belonging on a team. Um, and there are ways to develop that within organizations, very simple ways, things that managers can do to help create that sense of belonging. Um, Equity and inclusion are a big piece of that in creating that sense of belonging. Employee resource groups can be formed so that people feel like they belong, but diversity in your candidate selection. I mean, there's just a myriad of things that can be tackled here, but inspiring inclusivity and connection is part of a thriving, healthy, positive culture. So the V in Thrive culture is visible career and development opportunities. And it is showing up in surveys and poll results for 2024 and of what employees want, and that is development opportunities. I also see this with some nonprofits that I'm working with, small companies, 20 people, and it's so important when there aren't going to be a lot of career opportunities because maybe there's not a lot of turnover. You've got a solid 20 people that have been, or a lot of times in some of these nonprofits, there's people that have been around for decades and they're not going anywhere. So there's no mobility. So it's important that there are at least development opportunities so employees feel like they're growing, maybe not climbing a ladder, but developing themselves in other ways. And then oftentimes too, in smaller organizations, we're quick to just move somebody into the new role without maybe um, posting it publicly or posting it internally and giving everyone a fair opportunity. And so there's just different ways that we can look at making sure that career and development opportunities are visible. That's very important. A lot of times, I've worked in organizations where they did have a robust learning and development strategy, and courses were available to all employees. It was a perk that we all had, but it was not very well advertised or communicated. And so that V in Thrive culture is visible career and development opportunities. And so the last letter in Thrive culture is E, for empowering rewards and recognition. And it's really important that what your rewards and recognition are aligned again back to your core values, that you're rewarding and recognizing for the behaviors that you want to see in the culture. I'm also a proponent of pay transparency. I think that's easier probably in smaller organizations. Sometimes it's more difficult, but really looking at job descriptions and levels and the pay structure, how you're organizing the organization so that as you scale and grow, it's really important that you are this, and it kind of ties back to that visible career and development opportunities and creating a career path. So having empowering rewards and recognition and visibility to that helps an employee see what's ahead and what may want to keep them there. And I think the more that where there's equity with pay and creating the transparency around pay forces that equity. And I think it's really important, and it's on the horizon as businesses continue to evolve and grow. So that's the Thrive Culture framework. T is tribal values. H is helpful tools and processes. R is a responsive listening strategy. I is inspiring inclusivity and connection. V is visible career and development opportunities. And E is empowering rewards and recognition. If you want to see, I have a one-pager on my website at wmbcoaching.com/thrive. I'll also put a link to that in the show notes. But this is the framework we're going to be following on Fridays, having guests on to talk about their success and experience in different areas, diving deeper maybe with some of my clients. And I'm really excited about this new format. I hope you like it. Please, I'd love to hear from you if you want to drop me an email at wendy@wmbcoaching.com. That's wendy@wmbcoaching.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you like about the podcast, what you'd like to hear more of. And also, please go on Spotify or Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast, rate the episodes, share it with a friend. Thank you so much for listening. I really enjoy this, and I hope you're enjoying the content. And we'll see you Tuesday.